And we're live. Hey, Debbie, thank you for joining me tonight on the show, Crypto Normal Encounters. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I asked you last year, I think before August of last year, to come on the show, and life got in the way, and I just never got back around to it. But as I told you earlier, I was scrolling through my list of Facebook friends. I was like, you know what? I never did call Debbie. Let me get Debbie on the show because I've been wanting to have more women on the show, and it's hard to get like a lot of women to come on because I've reached out and I put posts and stuff like that. But I'm really trying to reach out and get more women on here because I don't think that we get enough like credit for the research and the work that we do. So I just wanted to just tell you, I think it's great that you have your own research group, and I'd like to hear more about that. Can you basically tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Well,
How
I'm
you
Debbie
how you how
Jones.
you got into the research and all that, and
Okay.
anything else you want to share?
Okay. I grew up in Northeast Texas, and we lived only about probably, gosh, I'd say 30 minutes, if that, as a crow flies, from Fouke, Arkansas. And so I had cousins and other relatives that lived in Fouke and real close to Fouke, all around that area. And it's not just Fouke that has Bigfoot, but anyway, we didn't know who Bigfoot was when I was little. When I was a kid, we
Hmm.
had not heard the term Bigfoot, Sasquatch, any of that. So what we had heard about, we called the Fouke monster. And so there had been stories, even when I was little, and Lord knows that was a long time ago. But yeah, we
Hmm.
we knew that there was a Fouke monster, but we didn't know, exactly what it was or anything. But we had heard stories, and then where I lived in the country in Malta, Texas, I was down a dirt road, and I lived there, of course, with my mama and daddy, and my mama lived right next door in the house that she had raised half of my family in. And my mama was sick with cancer. I was probably about 14 years old, and my daddy and I were outside hanging Christmas lights one night. And we had just an old wooden house, and it was long and narrow. And we were on the front porch hanging blue Christmas lights. We had the porch light was turned off, and our security light, the only one that we had, was in the backyard. So it was pitch black out front. And being in the country, we didn't have any city lights, street lights or anything like that. So it was pitch black. We were on the right side of the house, the front porch. And that's where we were starting to hang the blue Christmas lights. And on the opposite end of the front porch was our carport. And we didn't have a light in the carport. It was just the only light we had was the front porch light. And we had turned that off so we could see the Christmas lights better as we were hanging them. My mama was in the front bedroom, just right off the front door, and because she was sick, and Daddy and I were out there, and we had started on that right end of the house and hadn't gotten maybe a foot and a half down the front porch when coming from the direction that our carport was in, but out further down the road actually, because we were set back off the road. Um, we heard this. It was just this growl, moan, and howl kind of all combined together. Almost had a roar to it in a sense, also. And of course, I had never heard anything like that before. And my daddy, now, I just want to preface this to say I was adopted when I was 3 days old, and my mom and daddy were 41 years old when they adopted me. And so my daddy had fought in Vietnam, Korea, and World War II. So he was straight up a badass, and I had never ever seen him scared of anything. But when he heard that sound, I could tell that it unnerved him a little bit. And me being a 14-year-old girl out there, in the woods, I became unnerved when I saw that my daddy had been, shaken a little bit. But I had looked at him and I was like, "What was that, Daddy?" And he was like, "I don't know what that was." And he said, "Let's just keep on, try to finish up the lights." And so
Hmm.
we worked our way down, got towards about the center part of the front porch, and we heard it again. But this time it was closer to us, and it didn't sound like it was on the road anymore. It sounded like it was more over in my mama's front yard. And she lived just right there to the left of us. Well, now I'm really scared because it's closer and it's not on the road, it's closer towards our house. And so I start crying, and asking Daddy to come in the house. And
Right.
I'm like, let's go in, let's go in. He goes, no, you go on in, I'll be in there in a minute. And I said, no, I'm arguing with him now because I didn't want him to stay out there by himself. And so I'm saying, no, Daddy, you come in too. Well, about that time, just right there, it sounded like it was in our carport now. And it just let out another one of those god awful, I don't know what you would call it, because it was a combination, it seemed like, of that roar and the moan and the growl and everything. So by
What
this
time at
time,
what time at
it was
night would you say this was, Debbie?
it was dark, and it was the early part of December, so it had gotten dark relatively early. I don't remember what time it was, but it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
real late. It was probably around 7, maybe 7
Okay.
o'clock. But there it was, just a few feet from us down there in the carport. Now our car was in the carport, but it sounded like it was down there. And because our porch was raised up off the ground, so you had to step down to go into the carport. And it was open on
Right.
all sides. It was just a shed almost like, with
I
no
know what you're
walls.
talking. I know what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
And so by that time I was crying. I was scared to death, literally scared to death. And Daddy just pushed me in the house. And when you went in the house, it was a little bitty entryway, and you either had to go to the left or to the right. The
Mm-hmm.
left was my mama's bedroom, and to the right was my bedroom. It used to be a little formal living room. But anyway, I went into my mama's bedroom, and Daddy went around and went through my bedroom, and then that cut back through the hallway, and he went into another bedroom where they kept the guns. And he got a gun and came back out. And as he's going back out, I'm bawling, and I'm in there with my mama, and she's scared, not knowing what's going on, asking me. And I'm telling her that there's a monster outside and making this sound. And I'm roaring and moaning and growling and everything else that I can do to try to sound like what I had just heard. And then, I see my daddy go out there. Now I'm scared for my daddy. And he had a flashlight and his gun, and that's all I saw. So I go into my bedroom, and I'm looking out my bedroom windows, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
following him all the way around the house as he's going around the house with the flashlight and the gun. I'm going from window to window, making sure something don't get him. I don't know what I was
Right.
going to do, but I was going to do something. But anyway, so we end up back in there, with my mama. He finally comes back in the front door, and he's in there with us. And my mama is really wanting to know what's going on, because all I could do was try to say there's a monster outside, and she was worried and sick. And so Daddy comes in there, and he's telling her what we had heard. And he tells me to go call my Aunt Overlay, which is my mama's sister. And we lived down a dirt road. So if you went back up the dirt road, just hop and a skip in country terms,
Right.
there was a main road, Highway 82, that went down past us. And she lived just on the other side. I could walk to her house if I crossed the highway. And so he told me to go in there and call her, because she had lived there her whole life. And
Mm-hmm.
we had only lived there probably at that time about 6 years. And so he
Okay.
said, she's lived here forever. You make that sound that, it was doing, try to describe it to her, and she'll probably could tell us what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm on the phone in there with my Aunt Overly, and I'm, making this sound, and still scared to death. I'm sure I still had tears in my eyes. And she's like, "Oh, hon, don't you worry about that. Don't be scared." She said that was probably Mrs. Clay Schulte's bulls, which Miss Clay Schulte was this little old lady that lived across the dirt road from us all by herself, had this big old farm. Her husband had died, and she had cows and bulls and chicken and everything else up there. So here's my Aunt Overly now telling us, oh, that was probably just Miss Clay Schulte's bulls over there making some of these noises. Well, that pacified us. That
Mm-hmm.
helped us feel a little bit better, because I was scared. My daddy was scared, which scared me even more. My mama didn't know what in the world was going on because she didn't hear it. So we were
Okay. That's why I was
okay. And
asked. Did she hear it? She didn't hear it.
yeah, no, she didn't hear it. Mama didn't hear it. If she did, she didn't.
Okay.
I don't remember her saying anything about it. But of course, I was in hysterics, so I might have just missed that
Oh my
fact.
God.
You know,
That's
14-year-old girl
that's
got a monster
terrifying.
outside. It is.
What?
So the next day,
Okay, go
though, Miss
ahead. I'm
Clay
listening.
still. Okay. What'd you say?
No, I was telling you, go ahead. I'm listening. This is interesting.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So so the next day, Miss Clay Schulte actually came down to our house. She gave my mama shots for her, for her pain, and
Hmm.
Miss Clay Schulte was there. I was out in the backyard, I believe, and had come in the back door into the house. And when I came into the house, Daddy hollered at me and asked me to come up there into the front room where they were
Hmm.
all at. And so when I went in there, he said, "Hey, Debbie, make that sound that we heard last night from Miss Clay Schulte while she's here." And so I'm in there, roaring and moaning and growling and everything again. And I just remember, I can see her clear as day. She was sitting there next to my mama in the rocking chair and just a rocking. And when I got through, she looked up at my dad and she said, "Oh, Mr. Bob, I wish you hadn't told me that." And he said, "Oh, don't worry, Miss Clay Schulte. Overly told us that it was probably just one of your bulls or something over there." And she said, "Oh no, Mr. Bob." She said, "I don't have any of my bulls, out there right now." She said, "They're all up being bred." I think she said they were in decab being bred. And she said, "As a matter of fact, something's been killing my chickens." And so,
Oh,
we didn't know what it was, but I do have to admit that the thought of the fount monster, ran through our mind because that's the only other type of monster we had heard of. And we had heard just a
wow.
few little stories. And, but so we had that. And then,
So,
a couple of other
so
things that had happened.
that was your first ever experience, like with. So when she said, like, I wish you hadn't told me that, did she already know what was back there?
No, she never mentioned if she was aware or knew anything about a monster or anything at all. The only thing she ever said, she did let us know that us telling her that had scared her. But she did say that something had been, killing her chickens, and that some of them were even missing, that they just completely be gone, but some of them had been killed too. And so I don't know, you know, but what's so funny though is, like I said, I had cousins in Texarkana, and some of them lived in Fouke. Um, I grew up playing with them out there. I grew up half the time in the woods out there in Fouke because I was close with my cousins. And so we played all through there. And we were all aware of the Fouke monster. We just didn't know exactly what it was. We'd just heard stories. And, when you hear these stories, your
Right.
parents do dismiss them, and they don't want your kids to get scared, so they tell you that it's all just make believe and it's all stories. And so we didn't think a whole lot about it until this incident happened. And then another time, with my mama being sick, I was Daddy's right hand man, and I followed him everywhere and helped him out around the house and stuff. And we found a a coon, it was a possum actually, that had been killed and was on our property. And so it was late in the evening. And so we usually would go bury them or something, get rid of them. But Daddy, it was too
Hmm.
late. So Daddy put it in a metal trash can and he put the lid on it. And we got a great big rock. I mean, it was a big rock, it was big enough to where it
Right.
was so heavy that another animal wouldn't have been able to really get into it. And so he said, "We're going to put this rock on top of the trash can, and then we'll come back out tomorrow and we'll bury it, bury the possum." And so he put that big old rock up there. And then the next day we came out and we were getting ready to bury it. And he takes the rock off, he takes the lid off the trash can, and then he looks at in the trash can and looks back at me and he goes, "What'd you do with it?"
Oh my God.
And I said, "What are you talking about?" I was a
Oh
young
my
teenage girl, and yeah, I grew up in the country, but I'm not about to get in there and get this possum out by myself. And I said, "What are you
Absolutely
talking about?"
not.
Yeah, it was gone. And I said, "Daddy, I didn't get that possum." And he goes, "You didn't get it out of here?" And I said, "No." And he said, "But the lid and that big old rock was still sitting on it." I said, "Daddy, I didn't get that possum." And
Oh
so we don't
wow.
know what got it. but whatever got it, put that lid back on it and put that big old heavy rock back on it, on top of the lid. And so it was just things like that never
Mm-hmm.
added up until years later when we found out that the Fouke monster was a Bigfoot, and we
Wow.
started researching Bigfoot.
Is that so? Were those encounters? Was that the catalyst? So you were 14 and you were a teenager when these experiences started happening. How old
Yeah.
were you when you started your research group? And are those encounters? Was that the catalyst that got you started in this?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what piqued my interest in, the boogeyman, I guess you could call him. I'd always liked scary movies and everything like that, like most teenagers did. But
Mm-hmm.
experiencing something that you don't know what's doing it at
Mm-hmm.
your that's a whole nother story. And so those things stuck with me. I grew up, got married, moved off, to another town, lived in the city for a while, raised kids. But over that course of time, my mama passed away when I was 16. My daddy had lived there at the house in Malta for many years. And then he remarried and moved to Texarkana, which
Mm-hmm.
is just a hop and a skip, from Falk. It's right there. Um, by this time, after all these years, the word Bigfoot, had made its way to Texas. That was something that,
Mm-hmm.
then first off, we only thought it was out there in California. And then once we
Right.
started hearing more and more stories, we realized that this Bigfoot creature was in a lot of states. Uh, in between that time period of me being a young teenager with the Fouke monster and then me finding out that there's these things called Bigfoot all over the United States, I had started seeing things on the internet. Once we got a computer and the internet was available to us, you start seeing things, reading things. Um, I do remember one time that I worked at a store that had these wooden boxes,
Mm-hmm.
and they had animals carved on the front of the lids on the boxes, and you could open them up and it would make the sound of
Right.
them. And there was one that was a bear, because we always thought maybe it was just a bear that we heard. Maybe it was just a bear, because we had never heard a bear in real life. We had seen them on TV and stuff and all that, but we had never heard them in real life. And so I was listening to all the different boxes as a young adult and listening to the different animal sounds, and none of them ever sounded like that. And the one that was a bear, of course, was the closest thing, but it was still so far off from what we had heard. And so when I got the internet, I started looking up animal sounds, because this was something that, stayed with me for a long time. And so when I got the animal sounds, I started looking them all up on the internet, never could find it. So I was typing in on the search engine, animal sounds, roar, moan, growl combined. Well, then these
Right.
things about Bigfoot started coming up. And so I was like, holy crap. So I started listening to it. And it was exactly like what we had heard. Several of them were. Some were different, but a lot of them were exactly like what we had heard. So the next time my kids and I went down to Texarkana to visit my daddy, I went over to his computer there and I said, Daddy, I want you to listen to something and tell me if you've ever heard this. So I pulled it up on his computer and played it and looked at him. And I said, have you ever heard that before? And his words exactly were, you know damn good and well I have. And I said, well, what do you think it is? He said, well, I know what I think it is, but tell me what it says it is on there. And I grinned because I didn't think he was going to believe me. When I told him, I said, well, it says it's a Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, yep, that's what I've always thought it was. And I said, what? I was shocked,
Oh wow.
I said, what? What do you mean? I said, how come you never even mentioned that to me before? He said, well, I never wanted to scare you. And see, he was actually from California and had lived in Springfield, Illinois for a long time, but would go back and forth to see his family in California.
Right.
And I never knew anything about Patty being filmed in California because, without the internet, we led a very sheltered life for a long, long time. And we just didn't hear about things like that until we got a computer. And so he shocked me, and I asked him why, and he was like, I just never wanted to scare you, were you? And so all those years he had thought that's what it was.
Wow.
But
So
that's what started my
tell
fascination.
so tell me about when you actually started with the research and when you got together. Well, actually, before you go into that, after those encounters, like as a teenager, as an adult, now that have you had other sightings, experiences, or encounters?
You're going in and out.
Uh-oh. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think I can hear you a little better.
Debbie?
It was freezing up. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Uh-oh.
Can you? Is it okay now? Is it still freezing?
Yeah, I think it's okay now. But I
Okay,
didn't
I was
get the whole
asking
question.
I was asking since you're an adult, like have you had encounters now since you've been an adult, like with your research team or by yourself, like after all those encounters that you had in your teens?
Yeah, we've had as part of the research team and being getting out and researching with other people as well, not just the Sisters of the Moon. We've had several encounters now. As far as back in my hometown, never had anything more really, but I have had a lot of people from Malta and DeKalb and New Boston, the surrounding areas, contact me on Facebook now because I post a lot on my Facebook page and about Bigfoot. And I've had a lot of people message me and send me, information and tell me that they had sightings, where their sightings were at. And that was really cool. I thought I really enjoyed getting those reports from people I grew up with that never mentioned it
Yes.
to. And so, yeah, it's just a lot more confirmation, about the area.
And it's shocking. You'd be surprised how many people actually experience stuff, but they just refuse to talk about it because they don't want to get called crazy, like a lot of
Exactly.
us do in this field. And some things you just don't talk about with your family, your coworkers, or friends because it's like that the elephant in the room. Like nobody wants to talk about it, or when they do, they make a joke about it, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
this is serious. And I'm like, to me, I get offended when it's me when it's comes to my dogman sightings and encounters. I don't like my family to bring it up because it's like y'all are thinking that just wait until one day when you actually see one of these things and then see how you
Yeah.
laugh because
Yeah,
it's serious.
it is. It really is. And I don't know, maybe if I've been really lucky as far as the people I know and my family. Now, I know I have a few that kind of roll their eyes and dismiss it and just kind of laugh at me, a few of my
Mm-hmm.
friends and family. But for the most part, I would say 90 to 95% of the people I went to school with, the people I grew up with, my family, they haven't made fun of me. Some of them are believers as well. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
really, growing up in the location that I grew up in and everything, you almost can't help but believe in it because it's such a prevalent part of our history, Fouke, Arkansas. And I mean, like I said, everybody knew about the Fouke monster. We just didn't know that it was actually real. We thought it
Mm-hmm.
was just a story that had been passed around, and then they made this movie about it. And we went to see the movie when me and my two cousins and my mama and my aunt went to see the movie when it first came out, and we were just kids. And it scared us when it said based on true events. And then, of course, my mama and my aunt said, "Oh, hun, they're just saying that just to make it a little scarier. Don't believe that." And so we believed our parents.
Did you feel comfortable? Like, was there a time before you had those experiences? Was there ever a time when you would go out and y'all would go camping or anything like that, or any outdoor activities, hiking or anything? that if you stopped for a while until after you started researching, or do you still do that now? What would you say about that? Like, do you still do that, or have you ever done that before? And now you're fearful to go back out into the woods?
No, it never changed my, when I wanted to go into the woods, I did. We lived down a dirt road. We basically grew
Mm-hmm.
up in the woods. We had the woods right behind our house. We knew that there were things in the woods that could hurt us. We just never really looked at them as monsters. And so, after that happened with the hanging the Christmas lights and all of that, listening to the neighbor and my aunt and everybody telling us, "Oh, hon, it wasn't that." I put that out of my mind, you know, or I tried to. It was always in the back of my mind. But at the same time, I have to admit, I've always been a daredevil. I've always liked scary stuff. I've always been a thrill seeker. I love roller coasters, anything that gets your blood pumping. So to
Mm-hmm.
me, that just kind of excited me a little bit more, but at the same time, every now and then I would think about it, but I'd dismiss it because I didn't want to be scared. I didn't want to not be in the woods. I didn't want to not be off by myself, riding my bicycle or whatever. Because I mean, you had to go down the dirt road a long ways to get to your friend's house, and I
Oh yeah.
wasn't going to change any of that. So it didn't keep me from doing things. I always, there's other things out there in the woods that could hurt us just as bad or worse than a monster could. And so it honestly, it didn't change anything. If anything, it just made me want to find out more about it.
Did you ever during your so let's go into your research now with your team. So when you guys go out, have you ever? Well, before I go into that, I wanted to ask. Have you and your team gone out to investigate cases that have been sent in to you for people wanting you to come out and see if they have Bigfoot on their property?
No, we've never done that. We've never had anybody asking us to come out and investigate. We've only had people contacting us, telling us their stories.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, I think that's the only way they can get it out because they don't tell their family or friends, and so they know that, oh, Debbie believes in them. She knows they're real, so I can share my story with her. So
Absolutely.
that's what a lot of the people from the area I grew up in have done. But not one time has anybody ever asked me to come out there and investigate. Now, I did have a friend of mine that I had dated when I was like 16, 17 years old,
Mm-hmm.
lived in Foreman, Arkansas. And we've been friends ever since. We're Facebook friends. He contacted me not too long back. They had moved over to Oklahoma. They had been in North Carolina and then moved back over to Oklahoma. And he had seen me posting and sharing some shows that I'd been on, talking about the activity we had had up in Oklahoma at one time. And so he contacted me and he said, "Hey, where can you tell me where all that happened in Oklahoma that you were talking about?" And
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "Why are you asking?" He said, "Well, my daughter is dating this boy that lives just a couple of miles from us, and they owned a whole lot of land." And he said that this boy's family were having a lot of strange things happening on their property. And I
Right.
said, "Well, can you send me a pin on the map showing me where the boy lives, and I'll tell you if it's anywhere in the area." And so he sends me a pin, and I just grinned real big. I wrote him back, and I said, "Well, actually, that's about 10 miles from where all of this happened that you were asking about." And he said, "Holy crap." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because I live about a mile and a half from him, from the boy." And so, I've
Oh
had
my
stuff like
God.
that, but we've never gone out and really investigated. Now, Barbara and Sandy, I don't know, they may have. They both had stuff happen at their homes themselves. And so,
Oh wow.
that's how they got into the subject. Yeah, they've got some fascinating stories. So you'll definitely need to have them on your show so they can tell you
I
just the
am.
stuff they experienced on their home at their homes.
Now, do y'all do? I'm going to reach out to them. We'll get together after the show, and then we hopefully we can all get together and talk. And I'd like to see what y'all do. Really, do y'all have a YouTube channel? Because I think it would be great if y'all got out there and documented some of this research. Not enough people are actually doing that, and I think it's awesome. I mean, I think it's something we need to get out there.
Well, you know, when we started this, we did it for ourselves, basically. Like I said, they had both had a activity at their homes. Barbara had, I think, 30 acres. I may be wrong, so don't quote me on that, but they had a lot of acreage up around North Texas, and a barn and some horses, and she had some just fascinating stuff happen. Deer legs thrown up on the roof, headless rabbits. It's really interesting. And then Sandy was living in Georgia, and she had stuff happening in her backyard. And so, but I mean, we'll talk to people and they'll tell us the things. But as far as starting our own YouTube channel, we didn't get into this to do anything like that. We started researching just for our own interest, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it was when we started, we were blown away with the stuff that started happening to us when we were camping. I think it's just something about us being only females out there. Maybe we're less intimidating, a little more interesting, I don't know. But we never, ever dreamed that we'd have the experiences that we have had. And so often, too. I mean, we don't have it every time we go somewhere, but we have had a lot of stuff happen. And so the only time that we've ever gone live, when we do, we go live on the Beast page, Larry and Mark, Larry Porch and Mark Newble's page, Beast.
Yes.
And so we've gone live on their page before, mainly when we were up in our North Georgia location, because that's the only location that I can remember, at least, that we've ever had rocks thrown at us almost every single time we've been there. Now, this last time we went, we didn't have any, but they had come through with a controlled burn and had cut down a whole bunch of trees in our area. And so the activity was totally different this last time we went. But every time before that, we've had tons of rocks thrown at us while we're sitting in camp around the fire. And so finally, I said, I'm going to go live. This one spot that we camp at is on top of a mountain, and it's the only spot on that mountain that has signal. So if there's anybody else camping somewhere down the road or somewhere on that mountain, they'll come over to where we're camping just to get signal for a few minutes so they can use their phone, and then they'll go ahead and go back to wherever they're at. But we've always had signal there. And so we were able to go live while being pelted with rocks. And we did that, I believe, probably 3 or 4 nights in a row last year. And you could hear them running back behind our tent. You could hear, we were sitting out by the fire, but I went to walk into the tent at one point to get something out of the tent. And as I'm walking up to the tent, I could hear something run up behind the tent on the backside of it. And it startled me. And I think I said a few choice words that I shouldn't have said while I was live. But then after I got back to the campfire, I was looking at the screen. I said, "Could y'all hear that? Let me know if y'all heard that." And they were like, "Yes, we could hear it." And so that was kind of cool, being able to share those experiences. But
absolutely,
we've just never started a YouTube channel or anything, and so I don't have time to mess with it. I'm too busy doing other stuff.
Debbie Barbara Locke is here. She said you're her research partner with Sisters of the Moon.
Yeah. Yep. That's
hey,
Barbara.
Barbara, send me a friend request. We're gonna have you on here next. Matter of fact, how many of you is it part of your group, part of your team?
Just the 3 of us. Yeah. Me, Barbara, and Sandy. And Barbara and Sandy are
To have
sisters.
one of you to band together as your research too. This is so exciting to me. I'm so happy about having y'all on tonight because I'm gonna start having more women on the show because I don't think we get enough credit for our research or our encounters and the stuff that we see because as just the same way as it is in relationships or anything else, sometimes women we have a deep. I mean, I'm not gonna say that we're smarter, but we have a I don't know. It's like a sometimes like a certain type of intuition about things. We can feel different things differently. We can tell when there's a
Definitely
change
so.
in the atmosphere. So, and
I
then what you were
agree.
saying, well, you were saying earlier you felt like you didn't know like it seemed like in the city that you were at, it always seemed like they would always show up. Um, I've heard people say, I've heard Coonbo say this, and I think Old Bears Den and maybe a few others that have talked about the fact that Bigfoot attracted to human women. Um,
I mean,
and
it
there's
makes
some
sense.
scary cases. Oh yeah, well, according to some, and this is really strange, and I don't know how I feel about this, or if I even believe it or agree, but every right now, the fact that Bigfoot and Dogman even exist in the first place, that in and of itself for me is unbelievable. So, right now, where I am mentally on this, there's nothing that I won't say that's not true or not real because it's too much going on.
I
So,
know.
with the rock, I wanted to bring up that, but I just wondered, like, there's things that's been brought up as far as humans being able to procreate with Bigfoot, and I just don't know. I mean, but you also have people when it comes to alien encounters and sightings too that talk about they've been abducted and impregnated by aliens, and then there's star children walking around on the earth. Right now, I feel like we live in a matrix. Now, let
Yeah.
me ask you this, Deb, because I haven't asked you your standpoint, you and your team's standpoint. Do you guys believe that Bigfoot is an what do they call like an undiscovered, an unknown North American ape, or do you believe that there are Nephilim or paranormal aspect? What do you think about these things?
Well, my thoughts on it has changed a lot since I first, you know, started doing any kind of research, whether it was reading in books or getting on the internet or whatever. I started out with a mindset excuse me, that they were flesh and blood,
Mm-hmm.
and I was pretty set on that for a while. Now, this was before I actually got out in the woods and started researching them. Um, but at a young age, when all this was happening, I, I just thought it was a monster back then. But then the older I
Mm-hmm.
got and everything, I thought they were flesh and blood. I didn't put much thought into it until I started researching it. I went in thinking they were flesh and blood. And then when Barbara and Sandy and I and some of our friends would go camping, just us girls, some of the stuff that started happening, we couldn't explain. Um, I mean, there's been so much, Bettina, that has happened to us that we've had happened. And we had an incident pretty early on. It was actually our very first camp out as a group where something was hitting these big set of chimes that we had. And
Oh
I was
wow.
in the tent. Yeah, I was in the tent with a friend of ours named Patty, and it was freezing cold outside. She was in a mummy sleeping bag, so she only had this much of her face sticking out of it. She couldn't unzip it to get her hands and stuff out. And we had been having a lot of activity the night before and the second night and everything. And they had been running back and forth around our tent. We could see their shadows. One of the girls had a great big truck with lots of chrome on the bumper and the back and everything. And so
Mm-hmm.
she had put that around behind at an angle behind our two tents that we had set in an L shape. Big fire going out in front of us, and the tree with the great big, I mean, big old chimes that had the barrels on them, the tubes that hang down. And they were huge chimes. And I had gotten up on a stool and hung them up on a nail that was already on this tree where they had hung fishes
Uh-huh.
and, fish and stuff. Anyway, I hung the chimes, suspended them from up there, and we start hearing these chimes being hit, just going crazy. Well, I had left the flaps down on the doors of our tent just a little bit so I could peek out if the need came. Now, this was our very first camping trip as a group, and we had already found the day before this huge area. It was several acres just covered in bones, and this is an area that we call the killing field. And
Oh
it
wow.
became a very first primary location. But anyway, so now I'm thinking I've got to look up and get out, look out that the doors to see what's hitting those chimes. But I was pretty freaking scared. This was all new to us. This was our very first legit outing, just as a group of us, and just the girls. And at the time, there was just three of us camping. And so I'm talking to myself in my head, saying, "You can do this, Debbie. You can do it. Don't freak out. Don't be scared." I'm preparing myself to look out just in case I see something. But what I was seeing were the chimes just hanging straight down and doing this. I don't know if you can see
Mm-hmm.
that, but you could
Yes.
hear them being hit and they'd go straight out. The barrels normally, if wind's blowing them, they're all doing like this, they're going everywhere. If something's hitting them, those barrels would be all over the place. But they were all hanging just as if they were hanging perfectly still. It looked like invisible hands had them and was holding them where they were all still in their place.
Oh my
And
God.
there was nothing behind it. I mean, the fire was right there by this tree. We had stoked the fire before we went to bed. So the fire was right there by this tree where these chimes were hanging. There was wood on the other side of the tree that was cut wood for the fire. There was a wooden pallet, that you can use to carry things on, pieces of wood.
Yes.
It leaned up under those chimes, leaning against the tree, and we had put glow necklaces on further back along the wood line way up high so we could see if anything walked in front of those glow necklaces. And
Oh
so I could
wow.
see the chimes just fine, and there was absolutely nothing there, but something was hitting these chimes. And Patty's whispering to me, like, "What is it? What is it? What's doing it? What are you seeing?" And I'm just doing my fingers, like this, saying that that's all I can see, that there's nothing there. And so the next day we go out and I'm trying to hit the chimes, trying to recreate that. I can't get them to do like they were doing the night before.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't explain that, about what was there doing that because I saw absolutely nothing doing that, but something was. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's when I started considering, okay, maybe there is a little bit more to these creatures than just flesh and blood. So I'm kind of at the point now to where they're possibly flesh and blood and a little extra because
Absolutely.
they definitely have the ability to do a little extra.
That
Now what they are,
cloaking, I
you
mean,
know,
the cloaking, the mind speak, or just different stuff like that. Being able to, like, I've talked about several times on the show. Like, and I said, I've never had a Bigfoot encounter. All my sightings have been dogmen. But
ugh,
their footprints disappearing in the middle of an open field, and there's nowhere for them to have disappeared to. No tree for
right,
them to jump up on, no rocks, or no, nothing for them to jump up on. And,
yeah,
the last I did, I had the last show. Robin Haynes McCrae on the last show, and I asked her about that. What did she think was going on there? I said, "Do you think this is portals, or do you think what do you think is happening with that?" But based on at this point, when it comes to Bigfoot and Dogman, is ridiculous to me because she said, "I think that they are either levitating or they're going into another dimension or going into another portal." And to me, that's not crazy because I'm looking at it like the fact that they can actually go completely invisible, or what I like to call the predator effect. If y'all have seen the movie Predator, then you know what I'm talking about. Um,
yeah,
you can actually capture that on camera, and you will see that outline or that mirage type of, I don't know what you would call it, like, I guess like almost like a water based silhouette, if that makes sense. And it's really
yeah.
strange.
I Larry and I. were driving one day, just riding, and we were talking about this kind of things. And I told him, I said, at that point, I was like, I just don't know what I believe anymore about this. Cause I mean, I was adamant for a long time that they were flesh and blood and that was it. But, you know, when you're out researching and camping and getting out in the woods as much as a lot of us do, you end up experiencing a
Yeah.
lot of stuff, and you start experiencing stuff like this that you can't explain, that has no, you know, rational explanation for it. And so you have to open your mind and start considering other possibilities. And I tell you, it's been really, really hard for me to wrap my mind around a portal and all of this, even though I know people that seem just as sane as you and me that have experienced stuff like this,
Mm-hmm.
people I know and trust. And so I can't dismiss the things that they have said that they've seen. And Larry was
Mm-hmm.
telling me about a show that he had watched, and I can't remember what the show was, but they were talking about different dimensions. And the way that they finally explained it, because, you know, when you watch a lot of these scientific shows, that stuff is, you know, way up over my head. And even when they're sitting there trying to explain it, I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? I can't wrap my brain around it. But the way this show described it and explained it, he explained it to me as, you know, that, you know, say we're living in just the third dimension. Let's just say that. And so
Yeah.
everything before, or let's see, I don't know if I can explain this right or not, but let's say we live in the fifth dimension. And so we've got all of these dimensions, four dimensions before us. And and then we have all of these, say, five more dimensions in front of us, you know, that have come after us. Well, we can't see in their dimensions, but everything that's come after us can see back through our dimensions. And
Yes.
so when he was explaining that to me, that made sense. And I had never had it explained like that, never had heard that before, that, you know, every dimension that's come after us can see back through the dimensions before them, but we can't see the dimensions that have come after us. And I may have that totally backwards, but I don't think so. But that makes
Mm,
sense. And when he
well, I
told me
mean, we
that,
can't. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh, I was just saying, when he told me that, that's when I had the aha moment. I was like, oh my God, that makes sense.
Absolutely. It does. I mean, look at it like they're able to go, I heard people say that at one point in time we were able to tap in to a higher level of consciousness where we were able to do things that we can't do today. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know, telepathy, mind speak, and stuff like that. They're saying like the third eye, our third eye is closed now, the pineal gland and stuff like that. And I'm not sure, but I mean, if you're on a biblical aspect, I know he said that if you, God said in the Bible, like if you just believe and have mustard seed, you have enough faith, you can move mountains. And I don't know if that is meant literally or figuratively, but when he said if people won't praise him, then will cry out. If you look at stuff like
Yeah.
that, and then you hear people say that at one point in time that rocks could actually speak or the trees were alive, it's just really strange, and it almost makes you wonder, like, what world are we living in right now? It just does. It
Yeah.
seems like an episode of the Twilight Zone. It's really strange to me.
And I
Ray
do
Dahl.
believe that.
Uh huh.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Ray Dahl. You know Ray Dahl is. You know who that is Ray
Yes.
one of the members? She said you have a
Uh,
recording of one calling your name or saying something to you.
I do. It was in the area the same night the gibberish was recorded, and um, well, it's the same weekend, not the same night. I didn't know that that's what it said for a long, long time, because I'm really bad about listening to audio. I mean, really bad. And the only thing I was
Why?
interested
Why is that?
in, well, I'm lazy. I mean, I
I thought
hear
you were
it.
gonna say you're too afraid to listen back to it.
No, no. I mean, we experience it, so we know what we've heard, and that was enough for us because we didn't start this, our little group that we have, we for any other reason except to experience things ourselves. We
Right.
didn't go start into this to even try to capture anything. It's just people were like, well, you need to get, this is what you need. You need recorders, you need this equipment, you need headlamps. So we bought some of the stuff that we were told we needed, but we were there for the experience. And that's still pretty much how it is. Um, Now we do have equipment because we've been so lucky to have the experiences that we have had. We're like, okay, we're stupid if we don't try to get some better equipment because we have been so blessed with all of this experience. Then maybe we can capture something on there. But the night that the gibberish happened, we had just when we got there, it was just me and one other girl that first night. And this was, let's see, the killing field find was in January of 2017. And then where the gibberish was located, happened, was at our location that we call Tribulation Bay. And that happened in September of 2017. And so this was just a few months apart. And it was just me and another girl. We had gotten there. It was about 7:30 at night, mid-September. So the sun was, starting to set, and we were hurrying up, trying to get the tent up. I didn't even have recorders out, which now I've learned, you need to put the recorder out as soon as you get to wherever you're going. And so we didn't have any recorders out when we were setting up the tent. While we were setting up that tent, from the ridge line to our right, we could hear different things happening and these different sounds that wasn't making sense because there was no animals around us, but we were hearing moos, what sounded like cows, which now we
Yes.
realize were probably these moan sounds, but they were
Yes.
coming from the ridge line right there, real close to us. And we'd look up there and there'd be nothing there. And then a few minutes later, from that same exact location, we'd hear, like a sick, whimpering dog in that same area. And then a few minutes later, we hear what, sounded like a sick chicken or something. And then the last thing we heard was it sounded like a bear, but it didn't sound like a sick bear. It sounded like a real bear. And we knew that there was black bear in the area. And so then we started getting a little worried. And this happened over, a course of, about 45 minutes or so. And so we decided that uh, we needed some bear spray. And so we decided that we'd go into town, which was about a 40-minute drive from where we were. And I have to admit, we were kind of glad to leave that area for a little while because, this was
Mhm.
within the very first few months of us actually being out as a group. And we had not
Right.
experienced a lot of stuff. And so this was definitely big and new to us. And it was scary. And so we went to town. They didn't have any bear spray, unfortunately. And when we come back, we had been going about an hour and a half. Now, before we left, I said, okay, let me get my recorder out and set it on. We had a trailer that the other girl had pulled. And I set it on the trailer, turned it on and left. We were going an hour and a half, and it was dead silent on that recorder for an hour and a half while we were gone. But as soon as we got back, it was dark and it all started up. We had our chairs, started a fire, set out by the fires, and that whole night it was nothing but just there was so many whoops, wood knocks, calls going. You could hear them running around. And then when we finally decided to go into the tent, it stuff started happening at our
Yes.
tent. We heard these what I described as 2-syllable coughs, and it circled our tent, did that about 7 times, the cough sounds. And anyway, long story short, very long story. uh, After we finally, it started calming down about 3:30, between 3:30 and 4 in the morning is when the gibberish happened. I was still awake
Mhm.
because you'd start to get sleepy and then something else would start up and wake you up. We found out that another girl that was in our group at the time had pulled in about the same time that the gibberish had happened. And we could hear three
Mm-hmm.
different individuals on the gibberish, but we think there's only two that was messing with us that night because they were messing with two different parts of our tent at the same time. That's why we knew that there was at least two. But then during the gibberish, it sounded like this third one had come in and was getting on to them. At least that's how it sounded when I heard it. And then a tree went down right after that. So the next night, I made sure that I put recorders up, and so at 7:30, I strapped a recorder to a tree to my left, this was up by the ridge line where all of this stuff was taking place the night before. And so I had strapped one up over there. I said the day and the time and everything. And then I go over to the right, and it's a good distance apart, but still close enough to where I could see that tree that I had just strapped that recorder to. And I'm over on my tippy toes and, stretched up real high, strapping it with a zip tie up to the tree. I just said my name and all of that. And about that time from the left, over in the direction of the first recorder, I hear that 2-syllable cough again that we had heard the night before, earlier that night before. Actually, it was during the early morning hours. And it was just like,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so I heard it. Well, Barbara had been coughing a little bit. Barbara was there now. And she'd come in about 10 o'clock that morning. So she was there, and she had been out hanging glow necklaces in the tree line. So my first thought was that was Barbara. And so I looked over in that direction and just said, "There's Miss Barbara." And when I looked over there, Barbara wasn't over there. She wasn't anywhere to be seen.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so I go, "That wasn't Barbara." And I turn around and I call her again. She doesn't answer. So now I turn around to down the hill where our tent was, and I'm hollering, "Barbara, Barbara." So she steps out from behind the tent and just pops her head out to the side, because she was on the other side of the tent. And she goes, "What?" And I said, "Did you cough?" And she said, "No." And then I said,
Oh
"Did
my
anybody
God.
cough?" And she goes, "No." Then I realized, oh, shoot. I said, "Okay, hold on, wait a minute." And so I take off walking downhill towards the tent. And you can hear me on the recorders, saying all that. And so I go down there and I'm telling them, I heard the same thing that we were hearing last night, when it circled our tent. And it just sounded like a 2-syllable cough to me, but it was very, very breathy, if that makes sense. And so anyway,
And
like I said,
it
I played
does.
that. Huh? What was that?
Well, I wanted to ask you about that gibberish. Is that what people did you hear what people call the samurai? Did
To
it
me,
sound
the
like that?
gibberish, it doesn't sound anything to me like Ron Moorhead's recordings, although some people say it
Hmm.
does. But it doesn't to me, but it definitely sounds like it has a mixture of Asian and Native American
Yes.
dialect to it. And we had David Ellis of the Olympic Project. He analyzed it. He took the audio and the raw audio and broke it down into what he calls 5 phonemes, which this is all, over my head. He had to explain it, but he broke the gibberish part down into 5 phonemes, and then he slowed it down, and he said that it was still faster than humanly possible, even after he broke it down and slowed it down. But
Wow.
everybody, the majority of them that hear it say that it does sound Asian and Native American. But then that second night, that 2-syllable cough that I recorded on the first recorder over there, after somebody listened to it and slowed it down and was able to clip it and record it and then send it back to me, they were like, "You need to listen to this."
Right.
And so it was on the laptop, and we were camping when they brought it to me. And so I'm sitting at a picnic table with headphones on and listening to this, thinking I was going to hear that 2-syllable cough. that's when, oh, I still get goosebumps, Bettina. I mean, I never in my wildest dreams expected this, but when I listened to it on the audio after they had, slowed it down and all that, plain as day,
Yes.
it sounds like it goes, "Hey, Debbie," and I get
Oh,
goosebumps.
absolutely
It,
not.
it's
Absolutely.
very breathy, like it's whispering. But yet, when I heard it, it was loud enough for me to hear it, and that it was coming from over there to my left. And I looked immediately, and there was nothing there, nothing. But the night before, when I said that we had heard seven or eight of those two-syllable coughs, as I called it, now
Mm-mm.
that's making me, you know, now that I know what it actually said, now it's making me think it was saying my name when I thought it was coughs the night before, and it was circling our tent. And so I don't know, that still just creeps me out.
How long ago was that? And before you answer that, the fact that you know that these things are out there in the woods, do y'all take any protection with you when you go out into the woods knowing that these things are out there?
Yeah, definitely. But we all have guns. We have them on us, but you can't see them. We don't want them to be seen. But we don't have guns for Bigfoot, for protection from Bigfoot, because I think they'd be useless actually. And we don't want
I do
them to
too.
see us with the guns. We carry because of other humans and because of some of the wild animals that are out there. And but yeah,
Oh,
we don't
absolutely.
carry because of Bigfoot or anything like that. I mean, if they wanted to hurt us, they could very easily, with or without guns. And as much as we're in the woods, and I have to knock on wood for this because I don't want to take any chances, but if they were going to hurt us,
You're
they could have
superstitious
done
like
that.
me.
Yeah,
Oh
they
yeah,
could have had it a
absolutely.
million times over, you know, because we're out there a lot. And I just got back from camping in Daniel Boone National Forest for 5 days or 6 days, and fixing to go next week with some friends of ours. And so we're out there a lot, and
Did
they
the
have
team
every
when you were out there?
do what?
Was your team the ladies that were with you when y'all went out there? When you went out camping in
No,
Daniel Boone?
no, not this last time. Larry and I and Mark and several other friends of ours, Kane and Eric, Kane Michael and Eric Tipton, and we just had a whole
Oh
bunch
wow,
that
yeah.
met up there, and we've been there a few times before and had good activity, but this time there was a lot of people down the road from us and around us, and we didn't have anything happen until that last night that we were there, because we were there for so long, everybody else ended up leaving. And so that last night that we were there, we did have some activity, not a whole lot, but just a little. Although I did run off a bear.
How did you how did you manage that?
Well, Larry and I were in my tent, and Mark Newble was in the adjoining camp spot, and he was in the back of his truck. He has a little camper cab thing, and he was sleeping in the back of that. And then Misty Haynes was in a tent in that same little area. And there's a creek bed that runs all down behind the campsites, and then it goes straight up a hill back there. And so it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I could hear walking outside. And so I kept listening. And
Mm-hmm.
so now to the point where, okay, this is definitely walking and it's definitely heavy. So I woke up Larry, and he could hear it. And so I always leave the flaps on my windows and doors in the tent to where I can look out. And so I had
Mm-hmm.
all of that open a little bit, and I couldn't see anything. So I go over to the right side of the tent, which was on Larry's side, and I'm going to peek out the door, but this time I'm going to try to shine my spotlight out, and it does not go through mesh well. And I mean, I could, you can look out and it'll show a little spot, but it reflected back into my eye. And so it halfway
Yes.
blinded me for a few minutes, but I could still hear it out there to my right. And that was over in the area where Mark and Misty were at. And so I'm telling Larry, I'm like, it's over there. Something is over there. And it was driving me crazy because I knew I could hear it. And so he goes, well, go out there and shine your spotlight. So I went out, I have double doors on the end of my tent. So I very slowly unzipped that tent. And then I went out and shined my spotlight over there. And their cooler was set up on the picnic table. And there was a black bear on all four legs standing at the cooler with its head popped up and its nose was right at the crack where the lid closes. And
Oh my
as soon as
God.
I saw it, I hollered, hey bear, and it took off and went back down in the creek bed. And so that was it. And then I go back in the tent, I go talk to Misty for a few minutes over in her tent. And then I go back into our tent and zip it up. And I'm like, what the hell did I just do? I went out there because I was excited thinking it was a Bigfoot and I was going to catch a Bigfoot in my spotlight. And here I am, not even probably 25 feet
Mm-mm.
from this big black bear. I'm like, Debbie, you are stupid or or brave or just something. I don't know. But
I'm
I was like,
curious.
I don't
Well,
know. It
I
just
do.
comes over you.
What I've got so many questions down here, and right now, y'all that's in the chat, we're at an hour. We're probably gonna go. I'm having Debbie back, like because she's gonna come back too when I bring the whole team back. But I'm thinking I'm gonna have each of the ladies from the team back individually also. But I'm gonna start having more women on the show because I'm gonna start spotlighting women because I feel like our voices need to be heard too. And a lot of research is done, and for whatever reason I think sometimes some women can be more fearless than men, and I'm not that's not emasculating, that's just saying like we get out there and for whatever reason maybe these creatures, and I'm not saying this is always the case, but I don't know, I think they know that, of course they know the difference, but I don't know that it's just in my encounters I didn't have to worry about the ones that were out there. They never came and approached me, and I appreciate that, and I'm glad about it because at any point, because as you know, Debbie, like I said, I haven't not had Bigfoot encounters, but the same goes with Bigfoot and Dogman. Their speed, their ability to
Yeah.
cloak, go completely invisible, and I've captured some things on audio too. When I was recording before, sometimes there's things that you will hear on audio that you didn't hear in real time. Have y'all experienced that?
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm gonna
There's
say
lots of stuff.
that's one of those things for me that falls into the woo, or they call it the woo. I don't
Yeah.
even know how they came up with that, but that's one of those. If
Yeah.
you didn't hear it in real time, then that's something that's happening. And I may not be saying this right, but I would say there's something happening in the dimension or outside our frequency of hearing. I don't know, but
Yeah.
what for whatever reason our devices can pick it up, and I look at them somewhat similar or the same, or some of the things that you got with ghost hunters when they go out and do the EVPs and stuff like that, and they talk to the spirits and ask them questions and stuff like that, and the spirits respond back. I've heard some Bigfoot researchers who've actually gone out into the field as well and asked questions, and sometimes they might have heard of an audible response, and sometimes no, they heard it when they played the recorder back. And so I
Yeah.
think that's really interesting. Um, People often talk about the whole thing of I didn't know it. I knew that something wasn't right. I had this foreboding and dread. Everything went silent. You couldn't hear anything. The birds stopped chirping. Everything went silent. And then they smelled this strong odor that was like unlike anything they ever smelled. Have you ever experienced that? Or have y'all ever experienced that out on your investigations?
Well, we've definitely smelled some strange smells. Um, we can't say that it was in relation to Bigfoot because I know that we've had Bigfoot right around our tent before because I've mentioned the twinkle lights. That's why we put twinkle lights up, Christmas lights. We put them all around our tent to where if they walk between us, we can see their shadows. and we have seen their shadows many, many times on our tents. And but we haven't. I personally haven't smelt that smell to where I could directly say, "Oh, I smelled this smell, and I saw a Bigfoot, or we had Bigfoot activity, or I saw a Bigfoot shadow." I've never been able to really correlate the two. But we have smelled, strange smells before. Um, I've never really experienced now, the orb things. I've That's another thing that I kind of dismissed for a long, long time until I started experiencing them myself. And I have
Absolutely.
had I have had experiences with orbs that I cannot explain. Um, we had a good friend of ours, Tom Crabtree, make us a really nice night vision thermal type thing to where it's got
Mm-hmm.
built-in Wi-Fi, and you can use it out in the woods when there's not a bit of signal because it has it all built in, and we can transmit the image over to an iPad or to our phones or whatever. And the last time we were up in
Yes.
Georgia, that North Georgia location, I was setting it up. I had just turned it on and I was looking at the iPad to make sure the picture was being transmitted. And so I had it turned on and it was pointed towards my pickup truck. And behind my pickup truck is this big, we call it an island, just a big, huge mound of earth
Mm-hmm.
that comes up taller than my truck. And then there's trees that come out of the top of it. And on the other side of that is the dirt road. And while I'm looking at the iPad to make sure the iPad is on and it's getting the images that I've just turned on the little thermal thing, um, I'm seeing this orb. It was the hottest thing on the screen. It was bright, bright white. It was up above the island part, and it was on the backside of the trees because as it's moving, the trees in front of it is blocking it out. But there's the trees are kind of scarce, and so I was able to see this big orb, clearly. And I'm watching it on the screen, and while I'm looking at it. I look up from the screen, and I'm looking at it as it's moving, in front of me, and it's going very. I don't know if you can see this, but it's going very smoothly
Yeah.
like this, but then it'll bounce almost like, when you're walking, your head
Yeah.
kind of bobs. That's what it reminded me of.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I'm watching that, I want to make sure that it's still showing up on the screen. So it's going like, going across the island area. And I look down at the screen, and just as I look down at the screen, it shoots straight up, just as fast as it can be, shoots straight up. And Barbara and Sandy were standing over to my right, and I look at them and they're looking. So the part that I didn't see with my eyes, they saw with their eyes. The part that I saw on the screen or didn't see on the screen, they saw on the screen. So we both got parts of it. And so,
That's
I
awesome.
can't explain that. And then another time we were at LBL, Land Between the Lakes, and it was me and Larry. Mark Newble was there. Shelley Reed, I believe, was there. Dan Rickey, um, just a few of us. And we were at this big area where Mark and Larry had recorded about 13 howls a long time back. And Mark Newble takes off and he's walking down the road to my right. And I like knowing where everybody's at. So I'm watching him to see where he's going. And I like to keep him, in my eyesight. And so as I'm looking at him up at the tree line, far off distance, you know how the trees will create just a dark look and then the sky will be a little bit lighter because it was nighttime.
Yes.
Right along the tree line at the top to my right, there was an orb. And at first I thought it was an airplane, and it was moving perfectly straight across these treetops. And it was a white color. And as it's moving really, really slow, it starts changing colors, and it changes to like a pink color, like a pale pink color. And then it just keeps going. And I look over to see where Larry's at to see if he's seeing it. And about that time, I see that he's watching it. And so as it's steadily going down to the left, staying right along the treetops, it changes from that light pink color and it starts getting darker and it turns to a red color. Well, when it gets to the end of the tree line to where it's about the tree line would go left to come up in front of
Mhm.
us, it just disappears. As soon as it gets to that corner area, it just disappears. Well, at that same time, Dan Ricky is back over my left shoulder and he does a Bigfoot call. And I wasn't expecting that. So it kind of scared me. And I looked back at him. And then when I go to look back to see if it's, if anything else is there, about the time, as soon as he finishes his Bigfoot call, this gold color orb starts falling out of the sky, almost like a shooting star, except it was real close to us. And it looked like, you know, how fire, when it has the little embers falling from it and stuff
Yes.
and or popping off of it, this looked like it was a goldish color orb falling from the sky, almost like a shooting star, even, but it was an orb, plain as day, just falling in its gold color. And it had all of these little ember looking things coming from it. And as soon as that orb disappeared, there was a callback. Just boom, boom, boom. It all happened, so fast. And so that was when I first started thinking, okay, maybe there is something to this orb thing, because before I had never experienced orbs. And you don't necessarily believe something until you experience it. And so I was just
Absolutely.
listening to other people's experiences talking about orbs and thinking, okay, that's kind of hard to believe, but
Hmm.
they're experiencing it. And then once you
I
experience it, there's something to it.
I have somewhere else that I want to go with what you're saying right now. Let me post this up here real quick because I keep looking down at it. I'm just gonna put my phone in the phone stand, but because based on this conversation we're having, I ask you, what do you think is the correlation between lights in the sky, orbs, UFOs, and alien dogman and Bigfoot encounters? Because that's been reported a lot. Now, I want to tell you real quick, and I'm gonna have to take a quick bathroom break. But if you want, you can keep. Do you need a break? A 5 minute break? Or are you good?
Oh, I'm good.
Okay, so I'm gonna take a quick break, but I want you to answer this question. Do you feel like because of this, there's a correlation there? There's something there with it. When I had Greg Yost on the show, Greg Yost believed that the Bigfoot are able to manifest themselves or dematerialize themselves in the physical state of what you see as Bigfoot and turn into orbs at times. And I say that because I listened to what you said a few minutes ago. And when I listen to people's encounters and listen to stuff that people say, I don't just listen to it for entertainment purposes. Pieces of the puzzle together. So there's what Greg Yost said, and
Right.
then there's what you said, and then there's what Dogman and Bigfoot eyewitnesses say. Also, when it comes to Bigfoot and Dogman, they were chased out of the woods until once they got out of the tree line, they were no longer pursued past that tree line. And now you say that the orb, once it got to that tree line, it stopped. It didn't come out any further. Is that what you were saying with that?
Yeah, well, it was going down, like if you're looking at the sky and you can see that there's a row of trees, the trees are darker than the night sky is sometimes. And so it was like a whole row of trees to my right, and I could see that the trees
Yeah.
were darker, the sky was a little lighter, and this orb looked like it was traveling along the tops of those tree lines. And as it got to the very end to where the tree line then cut back to the left, it's almost like it made a perfect angle. And that's where that orb stopped. And it was at that same exact time that Dan Ricky did a call. And then I saw that other one. It looked like a totally different orb because it was a totally different color and it was closer to us, started falling out of the sky like a shooting star almost, except it was like a burning star because it had all these little gold embers. And so I looked at Larry because he saw it too. And I mean, I instantly when you're looking at it at first, you're like, what is that? You don't know what it is. But then when you have this Bigfoot call and an answer back happen and all of that, the first thing I did was correlate it with Bigfoot. And I don't know what it was. I have no way of knowing. I just know what I saw. I can't explain it. And then I know that Dan did a Bigfoot call. This thing's falling from the sky. And as soon as that thing from the sky disappears, there's a Bigfoot callback, responded. I don't know. But
That's
when you
real
have
interesting.
yeah, when you have things happening, in different ways multiple times, and it's things you can't explain, and yet you're having Bigfoot activity happening in response to a lot of this stuff, you can't help but somehow think that there is a possibility that Bigfoot somehow is associated with this. And so I can't explain it. I have no
Absolutely.
explanation at all for it. I only know what we've witnessed, and I can't explain it at all. And I'm not smart enough to go into quantum physics and all of that, but there's definitely something more to this creature. At least I
You
believe
know
so.
what? When it gets down to Suge asked a question earlier, and you had already answered it because I'd asked you, and I think maybe he missed the question, but they wanted to know if you took any protection with you when you're out on those investigations or campouts. And the answer to that is yes, she does, because it's not just Bigfoot and Dogman, and you still have to keep in mind, or other cryptids as well, but you got to keep in mind there's still bears, there's still mountain lions, there's still bobcats and wolves and foxes, coyotes, and everything else. So you still need to use common sense, and there's some people that are in the woods, so you still need to take
Yeah.
protection out there regardless. Now, as far as Bigfoot is concerned, I agree with what Debbie was saying a few minutes ago. It's really because of their paranormal abilities, the ability to cloak, the ability to put that infrasound on you. Because I've heard a lot of people say, and I'm sure you've heard this too, Debbie, where when they zap you with infrasound, you can be immobile. It can put you to sleep. It can make you sick. If they wanted to do that, they could pretty much do that, and you have no even use your weapon in the first place. Plus, they know what weapons are and phones too.
Yeah.
Apparently, because I've heard a lot of people say they say don't take that picture. And so, since we're on pictures right now, Debbie, have you and your team, when y'all been out in the field researching Bigfoot, have you guys gone out and noticed that some of the pictures that you take that they show up blurry or out of focus? Have y'all noticed that too?
Well, unfortunately, we've never had the opportunity to take one of a Bigfoot, but we have taken pictures, around camp and of things in the woods and stuff. And inevitably, some are going to be out of focus or blurry, or you're going to see something and say, what is that? Now, is it because of Bigfoot? I don't know. I'm not going to say that we've had anything that just appears that we didn't, at least I might, if I have had something like that happen, I don't remember it. But I I don't doubt that they can mess with your cameras, because here recently I've had my equipment at one location at least, that where we had a lot of Bigfoot activity going on, and every bit of my equipment had been charged the night before we got there. And that night that we
Mm-hmm.
had all this stuff happening, every single piece of my equipment, including my headlamps, I had 4 headlamps, and every single one of them died within like 10 minutes of wearing them. But every bit of my equipment was malfunctioning that night. And I've never had it happen like that before, to where every single piece of my equipment was messed up.
Was that a night
And
of
we
heavy
were,
Bigfoot activity that night?
yeah, well, I had something happen that I've never experienced before, and a friend of mine, Patty, that I mentioned, it was just me and her, and we were up in Arkansas, in northwest Arkansas, and it was just us. We were camping down close to the cemetery where we know that there had been some activity a few years back, and she had been seeing yellow, like I can't say it was eye shine, but it was like a yellow eye shine or light or something up pretty
Yes.
high in the trees. And so I was trying to see that, and I couldn't see it. And So I stopped looking and looked over to my right, which went across the little dirt road into another just trees. And when I looked over there, I saw red eye shine, and it was up pretty high, and two eyes, plain as day. I've never seen red eye shine like that before. And I told Patty, and I said, "Do you see that red eye shine?" And as she came up behind me to look, it dropped to the ground. Now it was pretty good ways up there, and I
Oh
didn't
my
know it at the
God.
time. Yeah, I didn't know it at the time, but that side of the road went down lower than the side of the road we were on, so it was up higher than what I even thought. But what got me is it dropped so fast to the ground, and then it took off running towards us, but it was at an angle, like going from my right to my left,
Oh my
and but
God.
it was coming towards us at an angle. I've never in my life seen anything move that fast, and all I could see were these two red eyes. And when it dropped down at an angle, it was like I could see the one eye, and then I could see just a little bit of the other eye, if that makes sense. But it was at an angle
Yeah.
going from my right to my left, and it disappeared behind my truck that was further out in that direction. And I had it parked at an angle going out towards the road, because we always turn around to where we're facing out. We have to jump in and leave for whatever reason. And it just disappeared behind my truck. But it literally, I don't get scared real easy, but that scared me because it was coming towards us, but at the rate of
Yes.
speed that it was going at this angle. I've never seen anything move that fast in my life, ever. And it still freaks me out thinking about it. And later that
I'm,
night, we went to
mhm.
bed, and our tent was set on a trail way far off from our vehicles, which we normally don't do that. But we wanted our tent in the trees. And so we put it on this trail that was surrounded by trees. And it had been freezing cold the night before. And so we took one of the big plastic tubs that we had our stuff in, and we
Yes.
set it behind our air mattress, because I have a big, air mattress, and Patty and I were both sleeping on that. And we put it behind the air mattress where that little air vent, will let air in. So we put it
Yes.
back there to block that air that was coming in. And so we went into the tent, laid down on the bed, I had my recorder. I just laid it up there because everything else had died. I had gone through 3 headlamps already and 2 recorders
Mm-mm.
already. And so I had gotten this other recorder out, and then that happened with the eye shine and all that. And we were like, that's it. Let's just go on into the tent. If something's going to happen, they'll come, while we're in there, because we've had stuff happen when we're in the tent. So we're laying there on the bed talking about all this stuff that had just happened. And we didn't hear anything at all walk up behind us, walk up anywhere around us, and we're surrounded by lots of
Hmm.
leaves, lots of brush and undergrowth. There were sticker bushes all over to the right. We had one set of lights on the right side that was still on, and the ones that were on my side had gone off already. And something just out of the blue hits our tent, but it hit down low, like where our heads were. But I
Hmm.
don't think it expected that tub to be there. And I had forgotten we had put that tub back there. And so when it hit the tent, it hit that tub, and it hit it hard, and it made this humongous sound.
Oh my
And I
God.
shouted out something because it scared the crap out of me. It's right behind our head. And then I realized, holy crap, it just hit the tub. And it just got dead silent for a second. And I'm looking at Patty, and she's looking at me. And we sit up in the bed a little bit. And the next thing we know, this was all within seconds. She looks over to her right, and she could see the shadow had come in just a small little bit, and then went back out. And she goes, I just saw something, and it did like this. And so it had stepped in and then went back, almost
Hmm.
like it knew it was creating a shadow on our tent, and then moved back. Then the next thing we hear it crashing through the sticker brushes and all that that's on the right hand side of our tent. But instead of going between the tent and the twinkle lights, it went behind the twinkle lights. So I think it realized that those twinkle lights caused it to cast a shadow on our tent. So it went behind the twinkle lights, it's crashing
Absolutely.
through there. And then when it gets to the front portion of our tent, it just stops. It doesn't go in front of it or anything. It just, the sound completely stops. So we're laying there, just now we're sitting up in the bed and we're
Mm-hmm.
watching, trying to see what we can see. We're looking at that right corner because we know it's up there. And then we can hear it slowly take steps as it's going across this little trail. Because now, it was a trail and it's only as wide as our tent. And you can hear it lightly just step, but it's very slowly, like it's doing it, knowing I've got to go slow or I'm going to make noise. And so when it gets to the left front corner
That's
of our tent,
disturbing.
yeah, it just stops. And now I'm waiting for it to come down my side of the tent. And I'm just waiting. We're both just sitting there waiting because we think we're going to hear it go down the left side of the tent. We hear absolutely nothing. The next thing we know, it's back here in the back, right behind our heads again, only it's on my
Mm-hmm.
side now. And I don't know how it got there, but it was there. And then we didn't hear anything else. And we just sit and we're waiting and waiting and waiting. Nothing else. Nothing else. And then we didn't have
Debbie,
anything else happen.
real quick, I've got like I didn't even ask you. Are you good or you need to go now? I mean, I got you for it's
Um,
like if you need to go now, that's fine because I will.
yeah, I probably do
How
need
do
to
you
go
feel?
now.
You need to go.
Yeah, I think I probably do. It's a little after nine
All right.
o'clock. I hate to, but
No, you're perfectly fine. So I was gonna say, Debbie, are you willing to come back because for part two? And I always ask people that, and I still got to get Robin back. But are you willing to come back for part two because I still have more stuff to discuss with you, and we'll talk about it behind the scenes. But I want to definitely have you back on here because I got a whole list of stuff written down over here for you right now. This is so interesting, and I want to
yeah, I'd
thank you
love to.
so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me. And I definitely would suggest, me and Barbara and Sandy, because like I said, and having Barbara and Sandy on by
Yes,
themselves too, because they've got so many awesome stories that they've experienced, themselves on their own property, and then all of us together as a group and other times too. So yeah,
absolutely.
just
I
let us
can't
know.
wait. You I'm not. I'm gonna message you in a few minutes on Messenger because I need to get in touch with Ray and who, I can't remember the other lady's name. What was the other one? She commented earlier. She's also part of your team.
Barbara,
Barbara and Ray. I
Barbara,
need to get in touch with them.
no, Barbara and Sandy are part of our team.
Barbara and Sandy.
Uh-huh.
All right,
Barbara
I'm
and
gonna
Sandy
message
and
you
me.
after the show.
Okay.
All right, I'm not gonna hold you, y'all. She's got to go. So, thank you so much for coming on. I'm gonna have you back on here, Debbie, and I'll reach out to you and get together. Maybe create a group chat for me, you, and the ladies to all get together and set something up to come back again. Also, all together. This is exciting.
Okay.
Look, but before you go, do you do? I know you said you're in Tennessee right now. Do you do a lot of campouts and investigations in the South? I know you said that you went to Daniel Boone also. Like, have you ever done any in Alabama?
Yes, actually, I have. The girls and I camp all over. I camp a lot with Larry and Mark and all of our friends up here too. And so I get I'm very lucky that I get to go to a lot of different places. The girls and I, Barbara and Sandy and I, have been up to California and all through the Pacific Northwest. We've camped in a lot of areas. I have family in Oregon, so I've camped in Oregon, and we hope to camp in every
Mm-hmm.
state there is eventually.
Well, I'm gonna reach out to you because I got some other projects in mind for you too. Because we're gonna talk about this behind the scenes. I'm excited. This is great. Thank
Okay,
you so much for.
sounds good. Thank you
All
for
right,
having me on. I appreciate it.
all right. Thank you, and you have a good night.
Thank you. You too. And bye to everybody in chat. Sorry we didn't
Bye,
get to all your
everybody.
questions.
Y'all will get them next time. She'll be back. Good night.
Night.
All right, y'all. Um, unless Well, you know what? We're at an hour and 34 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and shut it down too because it is meal time and I need to let the puppy out of the crate as well. But I want to thank each and every one of you. It's too many of y'all out there in the comments right now for me to like call each and every person out. But I really thank y'all. If y'all will share this. But before I go, one other thing, I'm gonna give y'all an announcement real quick too, because I'm gonna start going ahead and hosting for. I don't usually do two shows back to back, like two nights in a row, but um, for one, Debbie's only able to do them her the week. She's usually busy on weekends, and then on Fridays, that's my usual night that I go live on my shows. I might not go live every Friday night. It depends on whether I've got plans or whether the guest is canceled or whether I don't have a guest for that night. But y'all definitely want to tune in tomorrow night because when I tell y'all that tomorrow night's show is a terrifying dogman encounter, I mean, it is a terrifying dogman encounter. I mean, drool dripping from the mouth, a dog man that stands, I don't know, anywhere between, I'm going to say, according to this eyewitness, this dog man was the height on 2 feet as a polar bear and on all fours. The length was the size of a polar bear. This thing chased him and his friends. I'm not going to go into it. I'm just going to let y'all know right now, like, if y'all remember some of the old shows back in the day when Big Conda had some of the guests that he had on his show on Dogman Encounters, some of the earlier encounters were terrifying, like gripping you, having you at the edge of your seat where you're almost point where it'll make you just listening to it scared to go outside. Well, the guest that's coming on tomorrow night, y'all, this is one of those encounters. And when I was afraid just listening to it. I mean, it has me like when I go out to take the puppy out to go use the bathroom in the morning. It's like it's 4 o'clock in the morning. It's pitch black outside, and I know for a fact close to where I live at, I know that 3 dog men were killed over on Redstone Arsenal military base here in Huntsville back in 2020. 3 huge ones. And that is literally right outside of my neighborhood. So what I'm going to tell y'all right now is this: when it comes to Bigfoot and Dogman, y'all take every encounter that you listen to, and when you take those encounters, don't just listen to them for entertainment purposes because you don't know when that one day might be a day that you become an eyewitness. And some of the information with y'all um, is stuff that you need to be taken and keeping in mind that this might be something to help you later, something to get you out of the situation. Um, yep, Sharon, it is a nightmare. It's one of the scariest stories I ever heard. I mean, this thing actually chased these young 14-year-old boys down, and it was by the grace of God that they got out of that alive. This thing was huge. Let me see. Anyway, y'all, that's going to be at 7 o'clock tomorrow night, 7 o'clock Central. Y'all stick around. I will have Debbie Jones back. Debbie Jones, her research team is called Sisters of the Moon. She will be back again. And also, I will go ahead and announce this is what the month of April right now, and this is kind of far out there for right now. But the second annual Dogman Cryptid Conference, uh, hosted by Paranormal Roundtable with Josh Turner and Ken Gart, will be on September the 2nd and 3rd in Fort Worth, Texas. So for any of you who are wanting to go to the Paranormal Roundtable Dogman Cryptid Conference this year, if you didn't make it last year, you are definitely in for a treat. There's going to be a whole amazing guest lineup. It's probably, I don't know, probably 10 to 12 speakers. I'm one of the speakers this year at that event. Last year I was a panelist, but I'll be a speaker this year. Jessica Jones is going to be there. Sabilla Urban, I think Ron Moorhead is going to be there. It's a star-studded event. I mean, I'm excited about it. What time does it start? Suge, if you're talking about, you asked me what time does it start. I don't know. I guess you're talking tomorrow night. The show tomorrow night starts at 7. You definitely don't want to miss that. Any of you who are listening right now, if you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button, click the notification bell, and select all to get all notifications so you'll get notified every time I go live. Other than that, also the group Crypto Normal Encounters with B Moss. If you want to be a member of the group, then you can submit a request to join the group. And with that, everyone, thank each and every one of y'all for showing up tonight and supporting the show. Y'all tell y'all's friends about it. Hollister, make sure you come holler at me when you get to the conference. I mean, that's going to be September 2nd and 3rd. And like I said, y'all check it out. Paranormal Roundtable is Josh Turner's group on Facebook, and that's also the name of his YouTube channel. So go check Josh out too. Josh is great. Y'all check him out. Yep, Hollister, last year's conference was amazing. The after party was great. Nelly, yep. Nelly's awesome too. So I really appreciate y'all. I love y'all. And then y'all let me know too if y'all want me to have special guests or certain guests on the show and you want me to reach out to them. Just let me know, because I don't know all the different researchers and investigators that are out there. So just let me know what y'all want to do, and I'm always take y'all's suggestions and stuff like that, and have you guys in mind. And coming up pretty soon, like if y'all want me to start doing call-in shows, let me know that too. We'll start letting you guys who are in the live chat, maybe I'll start posting a StreamYard link, the live chat for those of you who would like to call in. But with that being said, thank y'all for showing up tonight. Jack Carey, so that yes, I'm friends with him on Facebook. I will reach out to him again. We had it set up last, I mean, maybe a year ago, and he had to reschedule, and we never just got back around to scheduling. But I definitely want to have him on the show. But thank you guys. Love y'all. Y'all have a good night. See y'all tomorrow night at 7. Don't forget.